The sun dipped behind the jagged mountains, casting long shadows over the battered fortress known as Redstone. Once, Redstone had been a thriving military base. Now, it was the last standing human stronghold in dead America. Inside its towering concrete walls, survivors gathered, watching the horizon nervously. Everyone knew the Horde was out there. They had seen the signs, the strange movements in the forests, the sudden quiet of the birds, the unsettling thrum of something massive moving just beyond sight. Captain Sarah Kincaid, a veteran soldier with sharp eyes and a scar down her cheek, stood on the watchtower scanning the tree-line through her binoculars. Her breath tightened as she whispered to herself, "They're coming." Below her, the survivors of Redstone, farmers, ex-cops, nurses, and ordinary people turned fighters, hurried to secure their positions. Barriers were reinforced, makeshift weapons prepared, and families hurried into the underground bunkers. The children, once playful, now sat silently beside their mothers, wide-eyed and clutching worn stuffed animals. Lieutenant Marcus Hale ran up the tower stairs 2 at a time, his face pale but determined. "Captain," he panted, "the scouts spotted movement along the east ridge." "It's worse than we thought, thousands." Sarah gritted her teeth. She'd seen hordes before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just another wave of wandering infected. This was organized, driven, like something had stirred them into purpose. She adjusted the radio on her shoulder. "Tell Commander Rivas to ready the artillery. We hold the walls at all costs." Down below, Commander Hector Rivas, a bulky man with gray streaks in his beard, barked orders. Artillery teams swung massive cannons into position. Spotters climbed ladders to their posts. Fighters, many barely older than teenagers, lined up along the barricades, clutching spears, crossbows, and salvaged rifles. The fortress trembled as a strange low rumble filled the air. The ground itself seemed to vibrate. Sarah's heart pounded as she focused her binoculars again. And then she saw them, a sea of figures emerging from the mist. Rotting, stumbling, snarling, some missing limbs, some crawling on all fours, their numbers stretching beyond sight. But this time, they weren't wandering mindlessly. They were charging. A shriek rang out, piercing and unnatural. Sarah lowered the binoculars in horror. "They're running," she shouted. "Positions. Everyone, positions." A massive, clawed zombie, larger and faster than any she'd ever seen, sprinted at the front of the Horde. It barreled through the trees like a battering ram, followed by hundreds of its kind. These weren't the slow, groaning undead they were used to, these were stronger, more agile, and seemingly more intelligent. Artillery fired with a thunderous boom, lighting up the night. Explosions tore through the front ranks of the Horde, sending limbs flying. But still they surged forward, relentless, undeterred. "Hold the line!" Rivas roared, firing his shotgun over the barricades. Fighters unleashed arrows and bullets, but it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with pebbles. Sarah grabbed the radio. "Lieutenant Hale! Get the fallback squads ready, we might not hold the walls." Hale's voice crackled back. "Understood, Captain. What about the civilians?" Her eyes darted to the bunkers where families huddled. She hated the thought, but she knew what had to be done. "If we fall, evacuate them through the tunnels. We can't let the Horde reach them." The walls shuddered as the first giant infected slammed into them. Concrete cracked, dust poured down, and defenders screamed as claws reached over the top. Sarah drew her blade and sliced at the hands trying to pull fighters over. "They're breaching," she yelled. Suddenly, a section of the east wall crumbled with a deafening crash. The Horde poured through like water through a broken dam. Screams erupted from the defenders as chaos exploded across Redstone. Rivas fired wildly, shouting, "Fall back! Fall back to the second line!" Sarah jumped from the tower, landing hard and rolling. She sprinted toward the breach, slicing through infected with savage precision. But it was no use, there were too many. She saw Hale waving frantically, ushering civilians into the tunnels. "Captain," he called. "We have to go." Sarah's chest heaved as she looked back at the burning, collapsing fortress. They had fought so hard, held out so long, but now, the real war was about to begin. This wasn't just about holding a base anymore. It was about survival. She ran to Hale, grabbing his arm. "Get them out. We regroup at the outpost in the canyon. Spread the word, Dead America isn't lost yet." As they disappeared into the dark tunnels, the roar of the Horde filled the air, shaking the ground, shaking the survivors' hearts. But Sarah's eyes burned with fierce determination. The walls had fallen, but the fight had only just begun. The tunnels beneath Redstone were narrow, damp, and poorly lit. Once built as secret military escape routes, they had become the last hope for the survivors. Captain Sarah Kincaid led the way, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Behind her, dozens of civilians stumbled along, mothers clutching children, wounded fighters limping, elders struggling to keep pace. Lieutenant Marcus Hale moved beside her, his breath ragged. "Do you think they'll follow us down here?" he asked, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Sarah tightened her grip on the map in her hand. "I don't know," she said quietly, "but we need to keep moving." Behind them, the faint echo of battle still rumbled through the tunnels, the sounds of Redstone's final stand. Sarah's chest clenched as she imagined the brave fighters left behind, buying them precious minutes. She pushed the thought away. She couldn't afford to break now. Suddenly, a soft cry came from the back of the group. Sarah turned sharply. One of the children, a little girl with curly hair, had fallen, scraping her knee. Her mother tried to soothe her, whispering, "Shoo, baby, we have to keep going." Sarah knelt beside them. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked gently. "Lena," the girl sniffled. "Well, Lena," Sarah smiled, "you're the bravest kid I know. Can you help me lead the way?" Lena nodded through her tears, clutching Sarah's hand. Together, they moved forward, weaving through the dark, twisting passageways. Hale pulled out a battered radio, trying to reach the outpost in the canyon. Come on," he muttered. Static crackled in his ear. He slammed his fist against the wall in frustration. Sarah glanced at him. "We'll make it. We have to." But deep down, she knew the truth, the outpost was at least a day's march through rough territory. And now that the walls were gone, nothing was stopping the Horde from spreading across the land. As they pushed deeper, the air grew colder, the silence thicker. Every footstep echoed like a drumbeat. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped steadily, an eerie soundtrack to their flight. Suddenly, the tunnel widened into a larger chamber, an old storage room. Sarah signaled for the group to halt. "We rest here," she ordered quietly. 15 minutes. People sank to the ground, exhausted. A few fighters stood guard, weapons ready. Hale crouched beside Sarah, pulling out a folded map. "There's another exit here," he said, pointing. "But it's risky, leads right into the open plains." Sarah rubbed her forehead. "We don't have a choice. If we stay underground too long, we'll be trapped." A sudden clatter made them both jump. One of the younger fighters had knocked over a crate. "Sorry," the boy stammered, cheeks flushing. Sarah waved it off, but her eyes sharpened as she noticed something behind the crate. A hidden passage, half blocked by debris. "What's this?" she murmured, stepping closer. With Hale's help, they cleared the opening. A narrow shaft led downward, steep and twisting. "It's not on any map," Hale said, frowning. Sarah hesitated. She hated surprises, but she also knew hidden paths could mean survival. Before she could decide, a chilling sound echoed through the tunnels, a faint, scraping noise. Then another. Then, a distant snarl. Sarah's blood ran cold. "They're in the tunnels." Hale's eyes widened. "But how?" Sarah didn't answer. She spun to the group. "Everyone up. We move, now." The survivors scrambled to their feet, terror flashing in their eyes. From the far end of the chamber, shadows flickered, twisted shapes, hunched and moving unnaturally fast. Sarah made a split-second decision. "Hale, take them through the main route. I'll check this passage. What? No. Hale grabbed her arm. I need to know where it leads. If it's safe, I'll signal you. If not, her voice hardened. We don't have time to argue. Hale's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Be careful. With a final look at the group, at Lena, clutching her mother's hand, Sarah ducked into the narrow shaft. It was pitch black, the walls tight and crumbling. She slid carefully, heart pounding, every sense alert. Behind her, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. She prayed Hale would get the group out before the infected caught up. Suddenly, the shaft widened, and Sarah found herself in an underground river. Cold water surged past her knees, the ceiling arching high above. She pulled out her radio. Hale, come in. Static. Then, Captain. I found a river tunnel. It's heading west. Might be a shortcut. Copy that. We're moving. But before Sarah could reply, a splash echoed nearby. She whipped around, weapon raised, and froze. A figure stood in the water, barely human, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Sarah's breath hitched. These weren't ordinary infected. This was something worse. As the creature lunged, Sarah braced herself. The real battle was only just beginning. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the creature lunged through the icy water. Without hesitation, she fired, the shot echoed like thunder in the underground chamber. The figure staggered but didn't fall. Damn it! Sarah cursed, stepping back. She fired again, aiming for the head this time. The creature shrieked, a high, unnatural sound, before collapsing into the dark water. Panting, Sarah crept forward, keeping her weapon trained. She shone her flashlight onto the body. Its skin was pale and stretched thin, its eyes glassy, its fingers claw-like. But something was different. Unlike the infected she'd fought before, this one wore remnants of military gear, a tattered uniform, a shattered helmet. She frowned. Could this have been one of their own, turned into something faster, stronger, more dangerous? Her radio crackled to life. Captain, we're at the main tunnel exit, Hale's voice came through, strained. We're under attack. Do you copy? Sarah gripped the radio. Hold them off. I'm on my way. She sprinted through the water, boots splashing. The narrow shaft twisted ahead, but she forced herself through, heart hammering. She had no time to figure out what the new creature was. Right now, her people needed her. Back at the main group, Hale crouched behind a barricade of crates and metal scraps, firing into the tunnel. The infected were coming faster now, not just the usual shambling hordes, but faster ones, darting along the walls, shrieking as they came. Reload. Hale barked. Two fighters scrambled to swap magazines. Lena's mother huddled in the corner, whispering softly to her daughter. Just a little longer, baby, she murmured, trying to hide the fear in her voice. Suddenly, the ceiling cracked. Dust rained down. One of the older tunnels groaned under the pressure. Hale's eyes darted up. We can't stay here, he shouted. He reached for the radio again. Sarah. Where are you? Sarah burst through the side passage just as the ceiling shuddered again. Go! Everyone, move, she shouted. She grabbed Lena's mother, helping her to her feet, then turned to Hale. We head west, there's a river tunnel. Hale didn't hesitate. You heard her. Fall back. The group surged toward the new passage, stumbling over rubble and debris. Behind them, the infected shrieked, their howls filling the air. Sarah and Hale covered the rear, firing in bursts, pushing the creatures back step by step. As they slipped into the river tunnel, the icy water hit their legs. Lena whimpered, clinging tightly to her mother. Hale lifted her up, carrying her across. Keep going, Sarah urged. But the river tunnel was narrow, too narrow for all of them to move quickly. Sarah's stomach twisted. If they got cornered here, they'd be trapped. Are you sure this leads out? Hale asked, his voice low. Sarah shook her head grimly. I don't know. They moved cautiously, every sound amplified by the rushing water. The survivors were exhausted, wet, and freezing, but Sarah pushed them forward. Finally, the tunnel opened into a larger cavern. Shafts of light pierced the ceiling, cracks in the earth above. Sarah spotted an old ladder leading up to a metal hatch. There, she pointed. Hale climbed up first, rattling the hatch. It groaned but didn't budge. It's stuck, he growled. Sarah climbed up beside him, bracing her shoulder against the hatch. Together, they shoved with everything they had. The hatch gave a sudden, loud creak and popped open. Fresh air rushed in, cold but clean. Sarah turned back. Get everyone up. Now. One by one, the survivors scrambled up the ladder, emerging into the pale dawn. They were outside, in the hills west of Redstone. The fortress was gone, the walls crumbled, smoke rising in the distance. Sarah stood at the top, scanning the horizon. She saw movement far off, not just infected, but something else. Hale climbed up beside her, catching his breath. What now, Captain? Sarah narrowed her eyes. We find the outpost. We warn them. And we fight. But as she looked at the strange, swift creatures now chasing them, she knew something had changed. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. The sun barely peeked over the ruined hills as Sarah led the survivors westward. Her boots crunched over dry, cracked soil, and every breath she took came with a metallic taste of ash. Behind her, Lena stumbled but held tight to her mother's hand. Hale moved alongside them, eyes constantly darting across the horizon. They'd escaped the tunnels, but to what? Captain, Hale said quietly, we're exposed here. Sarah knew it. No walls. No cover. Just open land stretching for miles. They had maybe 10 people left, all exhausted, some wounded. And somewhere out there, the new, faster infected were hunting them. She raised a hand, halting the group near a line of rocky outcrops. We rest here. 10 minutes. The survivors collapsed to the ground, grateful for even the smallest break. Sarah crouched beside Hale, pulling out a battered map. The outpost should be here, she pointed, tracing her finger along an old road. But that's if it's still standing. Hale glanced at her. You think we're walking into another slaughter? I think, Sarah said grimly, that if we stand still, we die here anyway. From the rocks above, unseen eyes watched them. A figure crouched, wrapped in ragged camouflage. He adjusted the scope of his rifle, watching the tiny group below. Another man crept up beside him. Should we tell the commander? The scout nodded. Yeah. They're not infected, but they're not locals either. Could be useful, or dangerous. He disappeared into the hills, leaving only the faintest trace behind. 10 minutes passed. Sarah rose, stretching her aching legs. Move out. They followed the broken road westward, weaving through ruined cars and toppled signs. The further they went, the more signs of past battles they saw, rusted barricades, crumbling sandbag walls, old shell casings scattered like bones. Lena's mother pulled Sarah aside. Captain, she's tired. She can't keep walking like this. Sarah crouched beside Lena, brushing the girl's hair back. I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer, okay? We'll find you somewhere safe soon. But even as she spoke, Sarah's stomach churned. Was she lying? Did any safe place even exist anymore? By late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of what looked like an abandoned military checkpoint. Guard towers leaned at awkward angles, and the gate hung half off its hinges. Sarah signaled for Hale and 2 others to follow her in first, weapons ready. They crept through the checkpoint. Empty. Or so it seemed. A sudden voice rang out, drop your weapons. Sarah froze. Men in ragged uniforms emerged from the shadows, rifles raised. They weren't infected, they were human. But their faces were hard, their eyes suspicious. Hale cursed under his breath. We don't have time for this. A tall man stepped forward, his uniform patched with old insignia. "Who's in charge here?" "I am," Sarah said calmly. "We're survivors from Redstone. We're not looking for a fight." The tall man gave a dry laugh. "Redstone? That place is gone. The Horde tore it apart 2 days ago." Sarah's heart sank. "We know. We were there." The man studied her, then waved a hand. His soldiers lowered their weapons slightly, but they didn't relax. "You can come in," he said. "But leave the weapons. We don't trust outsiders." Inside the checkpoint's crumbling walls, Sarah sat with the man, who introduced himself as Commander Barrett. He explained that they were part of a fractured militia, survivors from the early days of the fall. "We've been holding this ground for months," Barrett said, pouring Sarah a tin cup of water. "But lately, things have been changing." Sarah leaned forward. "You've seen them too, haven't you? The faster infected." Barrett's face darkened. "They're not just faster. They're smarter. Coordinated." Sarah's blood ran cold. She'd feared as much. Barrett sighed. "We thought we were safe here. But last night, we lost a scout patrol. Ripped apart. No warning." Sarah looked around the camp. Their people were barely hanging on, old weapons, limited food, worn-out fighters. "We need to work together," she said quietly. "If we don't, none of us are getting out of here alive." Barrett gave a bitter smile. "You sound like someone who's been fighting too long." Sarah nodded. "Aren't we all?" Outside, the sky turned purple with dusk. Hale paced the perimeter, uneasy. He didn't like sitting still. Not when the enemy was evolving, and certainly not when they were trapped inside another crumbling fortress. Suddenly, a cry went up from the watchtower. "Movement! East side!" Sarah and Barrett rushed out, weapons in hand. Hale climbed the tower, scanning with binoculars. In the distance, shapes moved, dozens of them, no, hundreds. Fast, darting shapes. Sarah's stomach twisted into knots. The Horde had found them. And this time, they weren't just coming to knock on the walls. They were coming to break them. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the checkpoint bathed in uneasy twilight. Sarah's heart pounded as she stood beside Commander Barrett on the battered watchtower. "Are you sure?" Barrett asked, his voice tight. Hale, scanning through binoculars, didn't even glance away. "I know what I saw. They're out there. Hundreds. Maybe more." Barrett cursed softly under his breath. "We don't have the numbers for this." Sarah's mind raced. She turned sharply. "We have to prepare. Now." Down below, survivors scrambled to reinforce what little defense they had, dragging old sandbags, setting up makeshift barricades, and checking worn weapons. Lena's mother clutched her daughter tightly, whispering reassurances the girl barely seemed to hear. Sarah moved through the camp, shouting orders. "Light the perimeter fires. Block every gap in the walls. Anyone who can hold a weapon, stand ready." She stopped at Hale's side. "You trust these people?" she asked quietly. Hale gave a grim smile. "I don't even trust the ground we're standing on right now." Sarah couldn't argue with that. As full darkness fell, eerie noises drifted in from the plains, shuffling, scraping, guttural growls. Shadows flickered beyond the flames. Barrett barked into a radio, rallying his fighters. "No one fires until I give the word. We only shoot when they breach." Sarah stared out into the blackness, feeling the weight of every life behind the walls. She thought of Redstone, of how quickly everything had fallen apart. She couldn't let that happen here. Not again. Suddenly, the first wave came. The infected surged out of the night, limbs pumping unnaturally fast, snarling and screeching. They crashed into the barricades, clawing and biting at anything in their way. Barrett gave the order. "Fire!" Gunfire erupted from the towers and walls, muzzle flashes lighting up the night. The stench of gunpowder filled the air as bullets tore into the attackers, but the creatures didn't stop. Sarah fired steadily, aiming for heads, feeling each shot rattle through her arms. Beside her, Hale worked the trigger of a battered rifle, his jaw clenched tight. For a moment, it seemed they were holding. Then the second wave hit. These weren't ordinary infected. They were faster. Smarter. One slammed into a barricade, feinting left, drawing fire, while another darted right, finding a gap and scrambling over. Two more followed, breaking through like water. Sarah's eyes widened. "They're learning," she whispered. Barrett shouted orders, trying to plug the breach, but it was chaos. Fighters fell back, shooting wildly, and screams erupted from within the walls. Sarah grabbed Hale's arm. "We have to fall back to the inner compound. We can't hold this line." Inside the compound, Lena's mother huddled with the other civilians, clutching a kitchen knife as though it could save her. Lena whimpered softly. A young fighter stumbled inside, blood streaking down his arm. "They're through," he gasped. Outside, the infected howled, surging deeper into the camp. Fires crackled, shadows danced, and the night became a nightmare. Sarah, Hale, and Barrett fell back, rallying a few surviving defenders near the central bunker. "We can't win this fight," Barrett panted. "We're too exposed." Sarah's mind raced. Is there an escape tunnel? An old supply route? Anything? Barrett hesitated, then nodded. "There's an underground exit. But it's risky, half-collapsed, unstable." Sarah's jaw tightened. "It's better than waiting here to be overrun." They gathered the remaining survivors, herding them toward the tunnel entrance. Lena clung to her mother, wide-eyed and pale. Hale paused at the tunnel hatch, glancing back at the chaos outside. "We're leaving this place to burn." Sarah touched his arm. "We don't have a choice." They descended into the darkness, the tunnel walls pressing close. Behind them, the sounds of battle faded, replaced by the low, ominous creaks of earth shifting above. As they moved deeper, the air grew colder, damper. Sarah kept glancing back, counting every head, making sure no one was left behind. Barrett led the way, flashlight flickering against the crumbling walls. "If we make it to the other side, we hit the river. We can follow it west." Sarah nodded grimly. "And after that?" Barrett gave a thin, tired smile. "We keep moving. That's all we can do." Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the tunnel. The ground shook, dust falling from the ceiling. Sarah froze. What was that? Hale spun, weapon raised. "Cave in?" Barrett swore. "No. That's them." From the far end of the tunnel, snarls echoed. The infected had found the underground route. Sarah's heart pounded as she turned, shouting to the others. "Run!" The narrow tunnel echoed with the pounding of boots and ragged breathing as Sarah, Hale, Barrett, and the terrified group of survivors sprinted into the blackness. Behind them, snarls and screeches grew louder, bouncing off the damp walls. Sarah's chest tightened. She could hear the infected closing in, claws scraping, bodies slamming into stone. "Faster," she shouted, urging Lena and her mother ahead. The girl stumbled, gasping, but her mother dragged her forward with desperate strength. Hale ran beside Sarah, glancing over his shoulder. "If they catch us in here, we're dead." "I know," Sarah panted. "Just keep moving." Up front, Barrett's flashlight beam jittered wildly across the crumbling walls. "There," he called. "I see the hatch." The tunnel narrowed even more, the walls pressing close, the air thick with damp earth. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air, a section of the ceiling crumbled, showering them with dirt. "Go! Go!" Barrett barked, hauling at the rusted hatch handle. With a groan, the metal door swung open, revealing the night sky beyond. Cool air rushed in, and for a moment, Sarah tasted freedom. One by one, the survivors scrambled out, blinking under the pale moonlight. Sarah shoved Hale toward the opening. "Get them out." He hesitated. You first. No, she snapped. I'm covering the rear. Reluctantly, Hale climbed up, pulling Lena and her mother to safety. Sarah turned, raising her weapon just as the first infected lunged from the tunnel's darkness. She squeezed the trigger, once, twice, dropping the creature. More followed. Her hands shook as she fired again, each shot deafening in the tight space. Suddenly, a cold hand clamped around her ankle. Sarah yanked free, heart hammering, and scrambled toward the hatch. Barrett reached down, grabbed her arm, and hauled her up just as the creatures slammed into the hatch's edge. With a grunt, Barrett slammed the door shut, jamming the locking bar in place. For a moment, the survivors stood in stunned silence, chests heaving. Then the hatch shuddered violently as the infected slammed into it from below, their snarls muffled but relentless. We need to move, Barrett said tightly. That door won't hold forever. They stood on the edge of a river, the dark water flowing fast and cold. Trees loomed nearby, their shadows deep and tangled. Where do we go? Lena's mother asked, clutching her daughter. Barrett pointed west. Follow the river. There's an old ranger station upriver. If it's still standing, we can regroup there. They set off at a brisk pace, the moonlight casting silver patterns on the rippling water. Sarah walked near the rear, eyes flicking between the dark woods and the others. Hale fell into step beside her. You okay? Sarah gave a tight nod. I will be. Once we're clear. He offered a tired smile. We're never really clear, are we? Hours passed, the group moving cautiously along the riverbank. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves made Sarah flinch. She knew they were being hunted. Not just by the infected, but by whatever force had driven them here. Suddenly, Barrett raised a fist, signaling a halt. Ahead, the trees thinned, revealing a dark silhouette, the ranger station. It stood on stilts above the ground, its wooden walls weathered but intact. A narrow stairway led up to the porch. Barrett motioned for the group to stay back. I'll check it out. Sarah grabbed his arm. We go together. Inside, the station was dusty but empty. Old maps hung on the walls, and a rusted radio sat on the desk. Sarah swept her flashlight over the room. Looks clear. Barrett nodded. Let's bring them in. One by one, the survivors climbed up, grateful for the shelter. Lena curled up in a corner, her mother stroking her hair softly. Hale slumped against the wall, wiping sweat from his brow. We made it. Sarah shook her head. For now. Outside, the woods were silent. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She stepped onto the porch, scanning the trees. Her grip tightened on her rifle. Hale joined her quietly. You feel it too? She nodded. Something's coming. Inside, Barrett fiddled with the old radio, static crackling through the speaker. Mayday, mayday, he repeated. This is Ranger Station Echo. Survivors requesting assistance. Anyone out there? For a long moment, there was only static. Then, faintly, a voice crackled through. Who is this? Repeat, who is calling? Barrett's eyes widened. We have contact. Sarah turned sharply as the voice came through. But before she could speak, Hale grabbed her arm, pointing into the trees. Her stomach dropped. Dozens of glowing eyes stared back at them from the darkness. The infected had found them, again. And this time, there was no easy escape. Sarah's breath caught as she stared into the trees. Dozens of infected stood motionless, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, their twisted bodies half hidden by shadows. How did they find us? Hale whispered, his voice tight. I don't know, Sarah murmured, but we're out of time. Barrett's voice crackled from inside the station. They answered, there's a military unit 2 days away. Sarah barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on the growing shapes in the treeline, creeping closer, slow and deliberate. Hale, get everyone inside, she said. Barrett, secure the doors. The survivors huddled in the ranger station, fear heavy in the air. Lena clung to her mother, while a middle-aged man named Roberts muttered prayers under his breath. Barrett slammed the door shut, jamming a heavy metal rod across it. "They're surrounding us." Sarah checked her ammo. "How long until dawn?" Hale glanced at his watch. 4 hours. A sudden, bone-chilling howl ripped through the night. The infected surged forward. They hit the station's walls like a wave, claws scraping, fists pounding, snarls and screeches filling the air. The wooden walls shuddered under the assault, dust falling from the ceiling. "Hold the windows!" Barrett barked. Sarah and Hale moved fast, pushing furniture against the glass. Lena's mother clutched her daughter tighter, rocking back and forth as the walls shook. Barrett worked the radio, voice tense. "Mayday, mayday! We're under attack. Immediate assistance needed." A crash upstairs. Sarah spun, heart hammering. "They're on the roof." She and Hale bolted up the narrow staircase, weapons raised. Outside the window, figures scrambled over the shingles, their pale hands clawing for purchase. Sarah smashed the window and fired, sending 2 creatures tumbling to the ground. Hale slammed the wooden shutters closed. Below, the door creaked under the pressure. Barrett gritted his teeth. "This won't hold." Suddenly, Roberts stood, eyes wide. "I know something. There's an old supply tunnel beneath the station. My brother helped build it when this place was a fire lookout." Sarah rushed downstairs. "Where?" Roberts pointed to a trapdoor hidden under a rug. "It leads to the riverbank. We can escape." Barrett hesitated. "If we all go, they'll hear. Someone has to draw them off." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Sarah stepped forward. "I'll do it." Hale grabbed her arm. "No, we both will." They worked fast. Barrett led the survivors through the trapdoor, into the narrow tunnel, while Sarah and Hale rigged a loud distraction, firing flares and setting off a propane canister near the front window. As the infected smashed through the door, they were met by a blinding burst of fire and noise. Sarah and Hale sprinted through the smoke, slipping into the tunnel just as the creatures stormed the room. The narrow passage was pitch dark, the only light from a faint lantern ahead where Barrett led the survivors. Sarah's chest ached, her breaths ragged, but she pushed forward. Behind them, the infected shrieked in rage, swarming the station, tearing through walls and windows, but for now, they hadn't found the tunnel. Minutes later, they emerged by the riverbank. The group collapsed onto the grass, gasping for air. Barrett knelt beside Sarah. "You saved us." She shook her head. "Not yet. They'll be back." In the distance, a faint rumble echoed through the night. Hale stood, eyes narrowing. "What's that?" They all turned, and saw headlights in the dark, far down the road. Barrett's radio crackled. "Echo team, we're inbound. Hold your position." Relief washed over the survivors like a wave. But even as Sarah allowed herself a shaky smile, she knew this wasn't the end. The infected were evolving. They had breached walls, tracked them across miles, learned to hunt in coordinated packs. The battle for dead America had only just begun. As the rumble of military trucks drew closer, Sarah glanced at her battered team, survivors clinging to hope, to each other. She tightened her grip on her rifle. "If we're going to survive this," she murmured, "we'll have to fight harder than ever." The roar of engines filled the night as military trucks rolled up the dirt road, headlights slicing through the darkness. Sarah shielded her eyes as soldiers jumped down, weapons raised, scanning the treeline. "Echo team, secure the perimeter," barked a tall officer. Barrett hurried forward, waving his arms. "We've got wounded civilians. We barely made it out." The officer's eyes flicked over the survivors, then settled on Sarah. "You're in charge?" She nodded, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. "What's the plan, sir?" "We pull you out and fall back to base," the officer said grimly. "But we've got a problem. There's a massive horde moving this way." We've seen groups like this before, they're not random anymore. They're organized. Sarah's stomach twisted. She remembered the way the infected had surrounded the ranger station, working together like a pack of wolves. How long until they're here? The officer glanced at his watch. 45 minutes, maybe less. As medics treated the wounded, Sarah pulled Hale aside. We can't run forever, she murmured. If they overrun the military too, there's nowhere left to go. Hale's jaw tightened. Then we make this count. They quickly laid out a defensive plan. The soldiers set up barricades, mounting machine guns on the trucks. Sarah, Hale, and Barrett helped the civilians load into the back, making sure Lena and the other children were protected. Barrett's hands trembled as he rechecked his rifle. We're not soldiers, Sarah. No, she said softly, but we're survivors. The night grew still, heavy with tension. Then, from the tree-line, came a low growl. Hundreds of glowing eyes emerged from the dark, twisted figures, pale and hunched, their mouths stretching into inhuman snarls. The horde surged forward. Hold the line, the officer shouted. Gunfire erupted, lighting up the night. Sarah crouched beside Hale, firing into the crowd. Bullets tore through the infected, but they just kept coming, clawing over their fallen, driven by a relentless hunger. One of the trucks exploded in a fireball, sending soldiers sprawling. They're flanking us. Barrett cried. Sarah spun around, and saw dozens of creatures pouring in from the riverbank. She grabbed a flare gun from her belt, fired into the trees, and signaled the soldiers. The officer rallied his troops, pulling them into a tighter circle. The infected crashed into the barricades, shrieking, tearing at the wood and metal. Sarah felt her strength waning, arms trembling as she reloaded. She looked around. Hale's face was streaked with sweat, Barrett was limping, the soldiers were falling back, step by step. We're not going to make it, Barrett gasped. Suddenly, the ground rumbled. A deafening roar split the night, and 2 military helicopters thundered overhead, their spotlights sweeping across the battlefield. Heavy machine guns opened fire from above, shredding the advancing horde. Sarah's knees buckled with relief as the infected scattered, retreating under the rain of bullets. Minutes later, the survivors were loaded onto evacuation trucks, the few remaining soldiers covering their retreat. Sarah slumped into the back of a vehicle beside Hale and Barrett, her head resting against the cool metal. She watched as the helicopters hovered over the burning battlefield, the last of the horde fleeing into the night. As the convoy rumbled away, Barrett gave a shaky laugh. We survived. Hale smiled faintly. For now. Sarah closed her eyes. She knew this was only a temporary victory. The infected were changing, learning. The military was running out of time. And dead America was far from saved. As dawn broke over the battered landscape, Sarah opened her eyes, her resolve hardening. They had survived the night, but the real war was still ahead. And she would be ready. The military convoy rumbled across the cracked highway, engines growling as dawn's pale light stretched across the ruined landscape. Sarah sat in the back of the truck, clutching her rifle. Beside her, Hale checked his bandaged arm while Barrett stared silently at the horizon. Lena huddled between her mother and a soldier, eyes wide and sleepless. They had survived the siege. But now came the bigger question, what next? The convoy arrived at a fortified compound, tall concrete walls, watchtowers bristling with guns, and soldiers posted at every corner. As they rolled through the heavy gates, Sarah saw more survivors, some injured, some hardened by weeks on the run, and military personnel who looked just as weary as the civilians. A stern-looking officer approached, saluting the convoy leader. You brought them here? The officer asked sharply. The leader nodded. They've seen the organized hordes. We need them. Sarah, Hale, and Barrett were led through narrow hallways deep into the compound. They passed doors marked restricted and level 4 clearance only. Finally, they entered a cold, sterile room where a woman in a lab coat waited. Her name tag read, Dr. Alara Vance, lead researcher. I've heard a lot about you, Dr. Vance said without looking up from her clipboard. You survived the ranger station and the ambush at the river. That's not luck, that's skill. Sarah crossed her arms. Why are we here? Dr. Vance looked up, her eyes sharp. Because you've seen what we're up against, and we need every edge we can get. She led them down a secured hallway and through a reinforced door. Inside was a large laboratory filled with containment tanks, strange equipment, and screens showing infected tissue samples. Barrett paled. What is all this? Dr. Vance gestured to the tanks. We've been studying the mutation. These infected aren't just mindless, they're evolving. We believe they're being guided by something, or someone. Sarah's stomach dropped. Are you saying they're organized on purpose? Dr. Vance nodded grimly. We've intercepted patterns, horde movements, coordinated attacks, groups that respond to signals. This isn't random. Hale stepped forward. What do you want us to do? The doctor took a deep breath. We need to track one of their central leaders. We call them alphas, infected who control the behavior of others. If we can take one down or capture it, we might learn how to disrupt their communication network. Sarah exchanged a glance with Hale and Barrett. We're not soldiers, Barrett muttered. No, Dr. Vance said calmly, but you're survivors. You've faced these things and lived. That night, the team gathered in a small briefing room. Maps were spread across the table, showing marked locations, dense forests, ruined towns, underground tunnels. The military planned to send in small, agile teams, and Sarah's group was to lead the first scout mission. Find the Alpha, the officer instructed. Mark its location. Don't engage. We'll handle the strike. As they prepared to leave, Sarah checked her gear. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. Barrett, standing nearby, gave a nervous chuckle. We survive one nightmare, and they throw us right into another. Hale clapped him on the shoulder. Welcome to the real fight. Before they moved out, Sarah paused, looking over the compound walls at the darkening forest beyond. Somewhere out there, a new kind of enemy waited, not mindless, not random, but calculating. And if they didn't stop it now, dead America might fall completely. She tightened her grip on her rifle, squared her shoulders, and turned to her team. Let's hunt. The night was thick with silence as Sarah, Hale, Barrett, and a small strike team moved cautiously through the dense forest. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves put their nerves on edge. The lab's intel pointed to an alpha, a dominant infected whose presence controlled the Horde's coordinated attacks, lurking somewhere ahead. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to focus. The survival of what remained of dead America depended on this mission. Ahead, the ground was littered with broken branches and shredded foliage, clear signs the Horde had passed recently. The air hung heavy with the stench of decay. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees. The team froze. Spread out. Keep quiet, Sarah whispered. From the shadows emerged figures, infected, but moving slower, more deliberate. And then she saw it, taller than the rest, with unnatural strength, eyes glowing faintly with a malevolent intelligence. The Alpha. The strike team took position, weapons raised but waiting. The Alpha snarled and emitted a piercing shriek. Within seconds, the surrounding infected halted, their movements syncing to the Alpha's commands. The horror was undeniable. This was no mindless monster. This was a general commanding an army. Sarah gave the signal. They fired. Bullets tore into the Alpha, but it shrugged them off, charging forward like a force of nature. Hale managed to land a shot, but the creature only snarled louder. Barrett threw a grenade, and the explosion rocked the forest, scattering the infected. But the Alpha, though wounded, pushed forward with terrifying resolve. In the chaos, Sarah closed the distance, raising her rifle for a final shot. Now, Hale, she shouted. Hale fired a tranquilizer dart, hitting the Alpha squarely in the neck. The creature staggered, eyes flickering uncertainly. The Horde faltered, confused without its leader. The team seized the moment, pushing forward and forcing the infected back into the shadows. Breathing heavily, Sarah watched as the Alpha collapsed, the fierce control fading from its gaze. The nightmare was ending. Back at the compound, the news spread quickly. "We've crippled the Horde's command," Dr. Vance announced. "Without the Alpha, their coordination will collapse." Soldiers and survivors alike felt a surge of hope. This wasn't the end, it was a beginning. Sarah stood outside the compound walls, looking at the horizon as dawn's first light painted the sky. Dead America was battered, broken, and scarred, but it still stood. And so did its people. Barrett approached, his smile weary but genuine. "We survived the walls, the hordes, and the darkness," he said. Sarah nodded. "Now, we rebuild. We fight back. We take back what was lost." The battle for dead America was far from over, but in that moment, hope was alive. And for the first time in a long time, the survivors believed they could win. White heavy check mark. End of part 10, 795 words. This wraps up your full 10-part story in third-person style, suspenseful and engaging, with no content likely to cause YouTube monetization issues. If you'd like, I can help with a recap, title suggestions, or even photo prompts to enhance your YouTube content. Just say the word.